And we're live with the Virtual Real Estate Investing Podcast. Mr. Frank Scappaticci. This is my radio voice, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. We have so much going on in our business right now. We're like negotiating a self-storage deal for the first time. I think we're going to actually probably get under contract maybe today. And we have a lender dropping the ball on us on one of the biggest flips we've ever done. So we're trying to do seller financing. I feel like you and I don't negotiate a lot, but we're all of a sudden like thrust into all these crazy negotiations, and I'm dead. So I know you don't drink, but I'm having a glass of wine after this episode.
Very nice. Very nice. It's weird. I'm exhausted on one hand, and on the other hand, like we're getting leads coming in, and usually I would like let the process take care of itself and have our acquisitions team action the lead. And now I'm like, I want to call the lead, right? Like I'm like hungry. I'm like getting in sales mode. Like I'll hit that lead, you know?
Yeah, exactly. We're like ravenous right now. Like once you get a taste, that dopamine hit for closing the deal, you chase it, right? So we got to be careful.
All right. So we've been going an interview every week. And one of these, we're kind of calling like brainstorming episodes, right? Today, we're going to talk all about trends. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback that people like this behind the curtain talk, some of the inside baseball. I think it's one of those things, you either love it or you hate it, but it seems like some people are loving it. So we've gotten feedback to keep doing it. So today we're talking about real estate trends. What do you think?
I love it, man. Let's, we're going to have fun. I think we can be really honest with the current state of real estate. I think we're in a market, at least in the secondary market, where some people are actually really struggling and some people are doing really, really well. I feel like we're kind of polarized in terms of profit and loss across our industry. So I definitely want to dive into that and talk about that stuff.
Great. Let's do it. What's your first trend? I think we're going to try like bold statement and then reaction to it. Kind of maybe a new format. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but let's try it.
So here's my first thought. And I'll start on a positive note for the people that are doing well. We're very market driven, I think, in real estate right now. It always is, but even more so than at any point in the previous time. I think if you're in the big cities, Austin or growing cities like Cape Coral, flippers are making a shit ton of money. They're making a ton of money, but it's how they're doing it that I think is interesting, right? The typical math equation that flippers use previously is like, hey, I acquire houses at 70% minus 70% of the resale value or whatever the comps say the max price of that house could be, minus the rehab cost. In big markets like New York City, it used to always be maybe 75% or maybe 80%. But now in cities like Austin, where appreciation is like 20% per year, people are paying 95% of the resale value of a house minus the rehab costs, and they're flipping it and they're making $150,000. So like that just shows you how cooked the economy actually is. And I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm just acknowledging that is certainly happening. So I don't know what your thoughts are there.
I think it's tough, man, right? Like part of me wants to say, hey, I'm just going to sit on the sidelines until all this takes care of itself, right? But how long is it going to be until this takes care of itself? No one knows. If you want to be an active real estate investor, you got to find your place in the market today.
Yeah, I was talking to a guy who, it makes it kind of hard to wholesale, right? Because wholesalers are already not trusted, and then you start bringing deals across the table, and you're like, "Hey, buyer, you want to buy this house at full max resale value and flip it from me?" And people are just kind of like, "Dude, what's your fee on this? This is BS. I could just buy a house straight off the MLS from a seller." So I feel like it makes wholesaling hard. But I was on the phone with a friend of ours, Sean, yesterday, who does PPC or pay-per-click advertising in the Austin, Texas market. And he's like, dude, because I take the flips on myself, for every $1 I put into PPC or Google ads, I'm getting $7 in revenue back. I'm like, well, that's a fantastic business. So what does that mean? He's getting leads from Google ads, and maybe he's buying that thing at 90% of value. Maybe he's buying it at 500 grand, putting 50 grand into it. He's selling that house for $750,000 probably, right? So super competitive market, extremely difficult to get leads through pay-per-click. He's got to be spending thousands of dollars a month, but 7-to-1, dude, big time business. It's big time.
Well, that's amazing. I wish we could get 7-to-1. We're more like 3-to-1 on average. But I think the tricky thing about a hot market is we get deals based on seller psychology, right? If sellers were completely logical, we could probably almost never buy from them, right? Like there are some instances where we are their only solution. right? No one else would buy that property. But oftentimes what we're offering is, hey, we'll give you a lower price, but you don't have to worry about any of the hassle. You only have to do one walkthrough. You don't have to take multiple bids. We can close on your timeline. That's all to make it easier. So that's seller psychology, right? Well, what does every seller in the country think right now? There's a housing shortage. Everyone needs houses. I can sell my house for top dollar, right? So every seller we try to negotiate with on the front end is like, I want top dollar. I want top dollar. I want top dollar. So that compresses everything on the front half of the business, right? Well, what about on the back half of the business? Well, generally the investors that we're selling to, right, are going to be much more logical, right? So in theory, if we're trying to wholesale, we've got sellers that don't want to give us a deal, and we've got investors that hopefully are generally logical and they're going off that market price. So that compresses, right? The only hope we have is if we flip, and what you're getting at, what all these guys and gals are taking advantage of, is their margin is compressed on the front end, but then they're having crazy first-time home buyers that are outbidding everyone and going way over asking price. And then they're making it up on the back end, right? I think it's really hard to make that up wholesaling right now. I think flipping, you have a much greater chance of success.
Let's just skip ahead to one of my other trends, because that's exactly what it was. So I think if anyone's listening, follows people on Instagram, there's a lot of wholesalers that you might follow that are like, yeah, I'm flipping houses now. I'm doing wholesales. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And part of it is, yes, in a lot of cases, that's the best way to monetize that particular deal or that house. But the problem with wholesaling is it adds processes to a very simple operation, right? If you have a company or you're at scale, you have an acquisitions team, you have a contract to close or disposition person, and you're only wholesaling. It's a very, very simple operation, and it becomes somewhat predictable. You know, it changes with the market, your margins and stuff, and how much it costs to get a contract. But it is easier to manage than adding a flipping operation to your business. Your contract to close person's like, shit, I got a whole other job, right? So there's a cost to that. You probably have to pay more for your staffing or through your own time. There's a reason people are doing it. It's not just because it's a good business decision. It's because, like you said, the margins are getting tight on wholesale fees for some people, right? Particularly, I think, for people that operate in landlord cities. So the cost per contract is up. There's more wholesalers. Sellers are expecting a higher price. What that does increase your max allowable offer at scale. And what does that mean? For every dollar you put into marketing, you don't want to make $2. You don't want to make $2.50, because if you have any overhead, you're not really taking that much profit in. So what are you going to do? What our friend Sean is doing in Austin, you're going to flip that damn house so that you make $4 for every dollar spent in marketing or more, rather than not. So what we're seeing is people that are originally just brokers or dealers of houses, they're putting on the construction helmet because they need to run a profitable business. It's not just because that house makes them more money. It's because they need to, right? So I think a lot of influencers confuse people out there. Like, everyone should wholesale. I'm like, no, they're doing it because they have employees and they got to feed them. That's my take on it.
I agree. I think we fall in that category too.
Yeah.
It was, a couple months ago, we're like, hey, let's look at this. Should we wholesale or should we flip? And it was like, hey, we have to flip. So we started doing that, right? Flipping multiple properties in multiple locations is a grind now, right? Like, this idea, like wholesaling, we've got a system, we've got a process that runs generally pretty smooth from start to finish, right? You can't do that with flipping a house. It's a new day every single day when you're flipping a house. And when you're in multiple markets with multiple contractors, you can do it. And our margins have been good. But it's also like, it's a daily grind, right?
Yeah, it's tough. And if you're a virtual wholesaler or flipper like we are, the other challenges are you're not going to be dealing with the same contractors in all your flips. Like, we're working with 4 or 5 contractors in different states right now, right? And to get all 4 or 5 of them adhering to your process, like, hey, drop pictures here, give me updates on this day. Dude, contractors, like, dude, these guys don't give a damn, right? Like, they are not all. I don't want to say that about all contractors, but they're a little wily. It's hard to corral all those guys and gals. So it adds a little bit of stress to your business, but is it adding to our top line and our profitability? I mean, yeah. So there's a give and take. We're making more money,
Yeah. So let's talk about acquisitions quick. Okay. So I want to talk all about outbound marketing because we're big fans of outbound marketing and we foresee some changes in that space. But we wanted to become more balanced and do inbound marketing, right? So outbound marketing is we reach out to people and say, hey, do you want to sell your house? Inbound marketing is we try to get people to come to us and say that they want to sell their house, right? So we've really invested in the last month or two in inbound marketing. Can you give us an overview of kind of how that's going, what you've learned, where we're currently at with it?
Well, I want to, yes, I'll definitely do that. But I wanted to talk about like why I think inbound is important. So for our company, we've had anywhere between 8 and 15 cold callers working in our company since January of this year. And it's been a profitable endeavor for us. We've gotten pretty good at it. We have an awesome team, Adam, Diane, Faith, Liberty. They do a great job, right? But just like SMS or texting, which we still do a little bit of, had disruption in 2020 from carriers like Verizon, AT&T, so on and so forth. Cold calling has started to see some of that. So while we're always going to keep doing this and like keep rocking our awesome team, you never want to be, as a business that's a direct to seller marketing agency, completely reliant on one lead channel, especially if basically every lead channel in our space is at risk, right? So you need to be somewhat diversified in your marketing, and we were not. So we're like, hey, what's something that we can scale? What fits into our business operations really, really easily? And since we have cash, we were a little flush with cash, and we still are. What can we do? Let's go to PPC, right? Let's be aggressive with our budgeting and let's stand it up. So we are at the point now where we're starting to get about a lead a day. We're doing a Texas statewide campaign. I was doing another campaign for Central Texas for a couple of counties we're interested in. I just turned that off because it was struggling from a performance perspective. But it's not cheap, right? It's like, so per lead, we're spending like $400 per lead right now, which is a lot more than what we do for cold calling and SMS, which we're getting pretty efficient in. So it's, and we got a contract this week. So we got a contract yesterday after doing this for about 40 days. So we're kind of at a point now where we haven't succeeded yet, but we've learned enough to keep doing it, right? Like it's succeeded just enough that we're like, all right, let's keep moving the needle here. And everything I've been told from mentors and other teachers is telling me, give it at least 3 months, be consistent with your budget, keep your face to the fire, don't tap out, and improve that process and improve your ads every week. That's really it.
Gotcha. So for someone who wants to stand up PPC, could someone do this by themselves? And can you talk through, AdWord Nerds, how we paid them? How hard is this? Could you use YouTube University to learn this stuff?
I think YouTube University for PPC is really tough. It's hard. It was hard for me, and I'm sure you too, because we both have given a hand at this, to find one person or one guy or gal on YouTube that just gives you all the answers. There's definitely masterminds out there like Nick Perry's that I'm sure have the answers in it. But we didn't really want to join a mastermind, right? Like we wanted just a teacher, or an at your pace course. And AdWords Nerds, I think, was the best one that we found. And I would say, I think we spent $2,500. It was worth $2,500 because when you're going to drop, 5 to 10 grand per month on a marketing channel, like spending $2,000 or $3,000 up front to ensure that you're not really totally screwing it up, or at least that you know how to evaluate it, is money well spent. And I think they do a good job of that. The value I think we're getting out of AdWords Nerds is they give you the tools to set up your initial campaign, your first one, and they give you a checklist that allows you to troubleshoot your campaign every week or however often you want to review it. And those activities are extremely important. Like the one thing I've seen, even over just a 2-month period approximately, is the efficiency has gone up like every 2 weeks or so. Like at the beginning, we were getting no clicks. Our cost per conversion for the first 3 weeks was like $1,000 or a cost per lead. And I'm like, well, this ain't going to work, And then now it's less than half that. So hopefully we continue to chip away at it and we get it down to a level where it's extremely profitable. Because the best thing about PPC is, you can only have so many cold callers in your business. You can't have 200 of them in single family real estate. You just can't. It won't work. But in PPC, if you're profitable at 10 grand, you might be profitable at 20 grand a month and spend. You might be profitable at 50, maybe 100. Depends how much you can handle in the back half of your business. So the scalability is awesome. So that's what we're hoping for.
Very good. And let's go outbound marketing, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll give the intro and then we can kind of go back and forth. We've I feel like we've beat it up, right? But this idea that text messaging was super awesome last year, it's gotten a lot harder. We're starting to see the same thing with cold calling, right? A lot of people who have iPhones, you're starting to get phone calls that say scam likely, right? And of course, you send it to immediately just send it to your voicemail. Well, that's happening to our phone numbers as we're trying to call people. It's saying scam likely. So we're having to rotate our phone numbers. It was like once a month, then once a week. We're close to doing it every day. We use ZenCall. They're working on some products to try to get like number rotation in or number monitoring. So it helps them. But I'm worried about that part of our business over the next 12 months. What do you think?
I think it doesn't go away, right? I think worst case scenario, it's kind of like SMS where you might have your volume might end up being capped. I think marketers are going to market. People are going to figure out a way to reach people or have conversations. So I think there's still going to be cold calling going around until we're long and gone, right? But the volume players, which includes us, we are definitely one of the volume players in this game. I think you might have to cap some of that volume. So that goes back to my comments earlier on if you want to have 15 to 20 houses a month in your business, or maybe even just over 10, you might need to start diversifying marketing channels unless you're really, really tight and really honed in on one of them, because carriers they're going to keep chipping away at this. So will you be able to make 200,000 outbound calls under a certain amount of numbers in 6 months from now? Probably not.
Yeah, I agree. There's, I think we'll always be able to, get a Zoom account that has a phone number and do really inefficient calling, click to call, right? And if no one else is doing it, if it's that hard to cold call, then maybe our conversion would go up, right? So maybe it would work. But I tend to think it's going to go to direct mail. I think like you said, we're going to continue to do cold calling. Scale might decrease, but I think there's going to be a big push towards direct mail, which I'm excited about. Right? I think at our scale and our marketing budget, we do well with direct mail, and I think our follow-up process is really good. Where I think there's a lot of people out there that, they're trying to get into this, and they're going to be like, all right, I'm going to spend $500 on marketing and see if it works. I think it's going to be really hard to spend $500 on marketing, get a deal, and then continue kind of keeping that, that snowball rolling down the hill, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. I think another thing though about direct mail that I like is if you're doing pay-per-click, someone sees your ad, they click on your website and they go to your website, your phone number's there, right? So you have to have a process for answering the phone, an inbound call, right? That's the exact same process your team's going to follow for direct mail, right? So I'm like, hey, PPC and direct mail operationally are like two peas in a pod, So I feel really, really good about anyone doing that, adding that into their repertoire.
I agree. All right, what's our next topic?
All right, let's talk about getting ish done. So I've been complaining, and maybe you're tired of it, but 2021, I think it's a profitable year for a lot of people. There's a lot of gold out there if you're looking in the right spots to go find, but getting shit done in 2021 I can't imagine a harder environment. Like when you go to lenders, if they need an appraisal, the appraisals always come in under, depending on what state you're in, because of rapid appreciation. Every title company is not hiring enough, and they're getting a lot of transactions. Like impossible to get them to get shit done on time. Contractors are like, oh, you have a deal? Okay, I can service it in 4 months, right? Because there's a shortage of contractors. So the one theme, if anyone's listening and they're like, man, I'm stressed out right now, I guess all I'm saying is you're not alone. The entire world is cooked, and it's just hard to get shit done, like I said.
I think one of the things that is interesting, and I hadn't thought about this before the call, but now that you're saying it makes me think wasn't that long ago we said we're going to be open door, right? We're like, hey, we're gonna beat the iBuyers. And I think we've worked really hard. I think we've gotten a lot better. And during that process, instead of getting closer to beating open door, we've been like, this is a lot of work, right? This is a lot of work. What does that mean? It means that I think you can do 100 houses a year, right? And we know people doing 100 houses a year, and that's incredible. That's awesome. We're on track to do 100 deals this year. Doing 500 deals, I've heard of people, but I don't know anyone, right? Is there really anyone doing 500 deals? I doubt it, right? 100 deals is a lot. Why is 100 deals a lot? Because you start realizing it is hard, man. Like if you do 100 flips, you got 100 contractors, right? You got 100 appraisals, you got 100 walkthroughs, you got all that stuff. So our progression has started to get to what other asset classes should we look at, right? Because the transaction, like what you're talking about is the difficulty in the transaction, right? Well, that's because our average house is $150,000 house. What if our average asset, the average thing we were doing real estate with was 1.5 million, right? A 10X. Then hypothetically, if our margin stayed the same, instead of doing 100 deals, we could do 10 deals, right? So that's why I think almost everyone that starts and has a lot of success in single family, they start looking at other asset classes. So I'm not tired of you complaining about it. I think it's kind of been this awakening of like, we were bullheaded and said, we're going to do it in single family, even though no one else can. And through this evolution, we're like, I think we should look at other asset classes, man.
Well, I think, I don't want to say you can't. I think what we really acknowledged is to get to that level, to like higher up and not scale up too fast, because to scale up so fast, you're going to do 500 houses. I just think you need outside funding if you're trying to do that in 2 years or less, right? Like someone else has got to like give you a business loan or something. And who wants to loan to someone that's flipping 200 houses? Like the risk is just astronomical. No one's going to lend that money out at 9% or something, unless it's your granddaddy or grandma, right? So it's just hard to do it that way. So the people that I think are doing like over 100, over 200 houses, they logically just take years to get there. Like that machine doesn't just appear out of thin air. And we're just impatient bastards, right? So like we're trying to grow this single family machine, and we're realizing that growth might be a little linear if we're not taking outside funding, which we're really not, besides for flips for private money. Then how do you grow the business? How do you raise the ceiling? And I think, like you said, we're like, okay, self-storage for us is probably that logical next step, because we can manage that operation, not pull our hair out. We can have focused effort, and it does not distract from the operations of our single family wholesaling business. Like deals can be disposed and acquired, and that has no negative impact on it. We can kind of insulate it from our team. So that's what makes it make sense for us.
Yeah, no, and I should reemphasize, I love single family, and
Me too.
We're not looking to stop doing stuff in single family. We're trying to continue crushing single family. But I think as we look at like, how do we 2X our profit? How do we 5X our profit? I think a percentage of that will be in other asset classes, just because you can't help but start getting thinner and thinner margins as you scale. I don't care what anyone says in the single family space. As you scale, margins just get tight, man.
Well, yeah. Like, so there's, for a couple of reasons, now we're all over the place, but a couple of reasons, right? Like one, like obviously overhead is one thing, but two, I think a solopreneur is going to get on the phone. Maybe they're managing 10 leads for a whole month, right? No, let's just say 20, right? They get decent lead flow. They're going to spend more time per lead on negotiating probably than someone who's dealing with 100 or 50. So that's one thing. And the other thing is like, they don't have a max allowable offer, right? When you have a scaled wholesaling business, you give your acquisition person the max allowable offer. Let's say it's 70% minus rehab value they can offer. They're going to start over time butting up against that number constantly, because that's their limit, and they have a lot of leads, right? So once you start flipping cheeseburgers, it's hard to like go back and be like, no, I'm going to chew off the maximum amount on this deal, because you've kind of proceduralized some of that thought process. So that's kind of a hard concept, I think, to understand. But what I'm saying is like the 100K deal, I think as you mature, might actually be less likely, maybe, per lead than when you first started out. So I think that's another reason for it. Also, like going to self-storage, like why else does it make sense? Well, because single family, even at scale, is a hustle, right? And I think going to a larger asset to increase your top line kind of like reduces a little bit of that hamster wheel, right? Like, oh, we can make 500 grand from the storage facility in a year and a half from now. That's nice to know. I don't have to call like 100 people to close this deal. You know what I mean? So I think that's another benefit.
Okay, so moving on, here's my question that I'm going to pose to you is, for the last 12 to 14 months, I think we've been as in single family real estate as anyone, right? Like we've been to the conferences, we've been to the masterminds, we've talked to people, we've listened to, we've read. What are some of those big things that you've learned in the last 12 to 14 months?
That the secondary market and the people that are in it, it's more, I always say this, it's more efficient than I thought, right? I think at scale, houses in a landlord city generally sell at X price, right? And that market looks a lot like this similar size city and a similar size demographics over here, right? I think when you first get in, you're like, I'm going to be so good in the phone that I'm going to get people to do whatever I want. And you realize like you can do that once or twice, but really there's like a price in the secondary market and it just makes sense, right? And like, I think our conversation is evidence of that, right? Sellers know that their houses are worth more. Every wholesaler and flipper feels that pain on the acquisition side all at the same time, right? So while the average American or just retail buyer in real estate and single family doesn't know about this like gigantic secondary market machine that's like operating underneath like secrecy, they don't really even know it's there. But now that I'm in it, I'm like, man, it's truly its own market, you know? It's commoditized, it's efficient, you know? So that's the biggest surprise I probably had.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's definitely some young ego where you're like, dude, if the average company can buy it at 70, we're just going to make our number 50 and then we're going to make way more margin, right? Yeah. And it doesn't work like that, right? Like there's a bell curve in, a population that says the majority of people are not going to sell below 20%. You can get a few people that'll sell 30%, and very few are going to sell more than that, right? So
yeah. I was going to say the people that get great margins, they do so through their process. Like I talked to a guy 2 weeks ago that specialized in the way he marketed towards pre-foreclosure people and the way he exited those deals. And he's like, yeah, I get less deals, but my margins are fat, right? Well, like that might not be the best example, but his process creates the margin, not like your salesmanship, right? That's hard to replicate over time.
Yeah, and then I just think at that there's the scale thing too, though, right? Where like if that acquisitions manager is getting one lead a day, like boy, they're going to squeeze every ounce of margin they can out of that. But if there's more leads, it's just not going to happen. I think my big two things are, one is I thought the cash buyers we'd sell to, we'd find one cash buyer in every town, and that would be our cash buyer, because that's how it's said on podcasts often, right? And I would say, we have a couple of repeat buyers, but our typical buyer is not, the landlord that owns 300 houses. Our typical buyer is just a real estate investor that's interested in a good deal. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's part of our process though. Like there are people that they find someone that's awesome in a market and they kind of like base their front end around that person. There's people who do that. I tend to think those are people that do lower volume than we do. Like we have a process where we're not really loyal to anybody. Like one time we had a guy who bought from us before and he worked for a hedge fund, and people always like bow to those guys and they're like, oh, I want to sell to hedge funds because they'll buy all my deals. And he basically offered like $2,000 less than another buyer. And like I told our dispo guy, I was like, we're selling to the highest bid. Like, because my attitude is if we're operating a good process, like I don't care if Bob Smith works for a hedge fund or not, like we're not giving out any friendly discounts, And that way I empower our dispo guy to make decisions. Otherwise he's like, well, how much of a discount do I give Bob? Is it $5,000? Is it $2,000? It's like, nah, man, the market sets the price and you sell to the market. That's it.
Yeah. And the other big thing that I've learned, and I feel like we repeat ourselves a lot, and I feel like this sounds cynical and could come off as jealousy some, but I can't believe how many fake gurus are lying, right? Like I can't believe if you scroll Facebook, how many people have 30,000, 50,000, 100,000 followers on Instagram. And if you look at their stuff, they're saying things that are dishonest. They're telling people, hey, off a $20 investment, I made 20 grand this weekend and you can do the same. Like, I can't believe how many people are doing that. And I think it's terrible. Like it really is.
Dude, there's people out there saying I spent $3,000 on marketing and I made $100,000 this month, and they have 2 closers on the acquisition team and 10 cold callers. I'm like, you spent $3,000. I'm like, you completely left out all your labor costs. Like maybe you paid $3,000 for the data, but you're obviously leaving out your entire staff, which sounds like it costs like $20,000 to $40,000. I don't know what you pay them, you know? So I'm like, yeah, there's a ton of that, especially with SMS getting slashed, because SMS was actually, in terms of profit margin, was awesome, right? It was fantastic. So people are trying to maintain those numbers, but they're hiring like a bunch more people. So yeah, they're full of shit. So I would say it's probably 50-50, at least on my IG feed, of who's lying and who's not. And I do think we're also seeing a lot of people, because wholesaling's it's still profitable, but it's hard and it's not getting easier. People tap out. And those people that were gurus or instructors that have tapped out are not telling you they've tapped out. So I think there's a lot of people that are no longer practicing that are still teaching.
Yeah. So there's some of that. And then I would also say over last year, we've seen a lot of people just disappear. Like people that were a loud voice in the community that are now completely silent. Like, and I don't know where their business is. I don't know where they're pivoting to, but they're not talking like they used to be talking.
Yeah, I think that's going to be in the wholesaling and flipping space. That'll be common because the nature of the business is like you burn really bright and then you burn out, you know, like, and we know how we could see in our business, like how that's possible, right? It is a hard machine to sustain. So I don't know if that's a 21 thing. I think that might be a forever thing. And maybe it's always been that way. So I don't know.
Yeah. All right. What's our next topic?
Okay. Let's talk iBuyers, man. This goes back to PPC. So when I look at our Google ads in Texas, statewide campaign, it tells you who your number one competitors are, right? And our competitors are not like another wholesaler that we're friends with, right? Or agents. It is right now, Open Doors number 1 against us. Then it was Zillow, OfferPad, Redfin, Realtor.com, and then the We Buy Ugly Houses guys and gals are right underneath that. Those are the competitors. So they're not only spending more money on the marketing that that wholesalers do, they're also just buying a shit ton more houses than they did before 2021 or 2020. So I definitely want to talk about that. What are your thoughts there?
I think the initial business plan was Zillow is going to replace agents, right? Open Door is going to replace agents. I don't think that's going to happen in our lifetime, right? Like I do not think agents are going to be replaced, right? It's not because they add so much value, but it's because of 2 reasons, right? One is people are used to buying houses with agents, right? Like that's how your parents did it. That's how you will likely do it. Okay. People are scared to do it without it. Right. And then the biggest reason is there's like 1 million agents fighting all day, every day. Right. And we know like the number of agents in any market is constantly rotating because the lifespan of an agent is real short. But the bottom line is the National Association of Realtors has like put it in these agents' heads, right? Like fight, scratch, claw, do whatever you have to do to remain part of that process, to try to scare people, to tell them that they can't sell houses on their own, right? And I don't think Zillow, Open Door, or anyone else is going to beat that anytime soon, right? Like no matter how much money they have, right? Like there's this information operations campaign that all these agents are doing every day, and I don't think you can beat it.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're trying to corner also Zillow and Redfin. They make money a little bit differently, but they're all trying to corner the entire transaction. Like you're going to start being able to get loans from Zillow. You can in some cases. They can facilitate the transactions, do all the transaction coordination, aka a title company, in a lot of different states. So they're looking at it like, okay, if I can take the agent fees, if I can take the closing costs, and I can do all this and provide the title insurance, and I get the loan points, then like I'm going to eventually get to a point where it's profitable. This transaction is profitable, and then, or maybe simultaneously, I'm going to start undercutting agents, title companies, and all these other groups, and I'm going to make me so attractive from a cost perspective that buyers and sellers have to go to me, right? So that's probably what I think the best case scenario is for iBuyers. But dude, that's going to take a long time because you know it's really hard to run title companies, loan companies, because the middle offices for those, the fulfillment operations for those are like so entrenched in like old ways of doing things and so difficult to change because you got like local legislature, state legislature involved. Dude, it's going to take a long ass time. It's a massive pain in the ass to transform that industry. And that's what they're trying to do. So,
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on them, right? Like I would not invest in them. I've read their annual reports and their 10Ks, and I think they're valued way too high. I think Zillow's going to be a great company, right? Like they have name recognition, but are they going to buy all the ugly houses in the United States? No, not at all.
I could see a situation where, because they are profitable with their tech and selling leads, right? They get a lot of great leads. It's the best lead gen business in the world, right? Is Zillow,
Mhm.
someone goes in and they're like, I want to buy this house, click submit. It's a buyer lead to an agent, right? The seller's like, I want to sell my house, click. That's a lead too to an agent. So Zillow's super profitable with leads. And I think they're awesome at it. So they'll be profitable there.
Agree.
But as far as like buying houses and managing transactions, I feel like I could see a world where hedge funds like BlackRock, Invitation Homes, maybe partner with Zillow to get some of those leads. And maybe Zillow is like a middleman. They buy the house, hold it for them for a period of time and service that transaction. I could see like some buddy to buddy, business and brokering done that way. But I hope and I assume that that's not a big enough market share to dominate single family. It could be though. It depends how aggressive Wall Street is as a whole.
Yeah. And that's interesting too, going to the Invitation Homes? Yeah, Invitation Homes. I always want to say Independence Homes. Invitation Homes and the news articles we've seen about Wall Street buying up all the residential houses, and that's what's causing the demand. I mean, as I dig into that, I think most of that is BS and just scare tactics. And actually, the number of houses they buy compared to the number of houses homeowners buy is very, very small.
Yeah, I think we will definitely see entire subdivisions though more commonly owned by larger institutions. Like I think the days where Frank and John bought some land, worked with the developer, took out some money, started a fund, and built 50 houses in Tampa. I think like we might see them creep into those situations more, and maybe less of the mom and pop operators do those at all. But there's already big players doing a lot of that work, so is Wall Street going to completely change that? I don't know.
Well, Wall Street's been there for a while, right? Like if you go to any master plan community or any large, any place in the South or out in Colorado, and you see a community where 100 plus houses are being developed. If you go look at those builders, chances are those builders, if you track it back, those builders are being paid through a publicly traded company, right? So I think it's kind of already there. People just didn't realize it.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is I think that share of those homes or subdivisions that are operated by people with that amount of cash, we're just going to go up. I think that's an easy opportunity for them.
No, I agree. Okay, my question. This is a loaded question, but I'm curious what you think. Class D neighborhoods, as margins compress, right? What do you think about Class D neighborhoods? We've looked at some lower end rentals. Can people invest in some of these neighborhoods? Should you, from like a moral standpoint, try to do your best to invest in some of these neighborhoods? What are some of your thoughts?
It's tough, man. It's the maintenance risk is like, you're not going to have enough cash flow on those homes if you're holding them to justify dropping 15 grand on the roof or something, right? Like that's why you see so many of those homes dilapidated, all those rentals, and so many tired landlords trying to dump them at some point, selling them all cash, because it just doesn't really make sense. If you look at your adjusted yearly rate of return and then you're making $400 on a rental per month, and then you have a 10 grand bill, you're like, I don't want to own this anymore. And then you sell it at a discount, right? Like that's what everybody does. It's hard to economically justify it. I think the real question is, how do we get lenders and the government to insert liquidity into those markets? Otherwise, I don't understand how you can get around this problem I'm bringing up, unless you give tax breaks to people who invest in those homes that fit that criteria directly. So what I mean by that is this: if you're trying to buy a house under 70 grand, maybe it's a $50,000 house, and you go to a large lender, they might be like, dude, I'm not wasting my time on that. Or they'll figure out some way to subtly tell you that, right? So you have to go to a local credit union. Not everyone's this advanced in their thinking. So that's going to limit the liquidity in that market. and then the prices don't increase and they don't appreciate, right? So you get no appreciation. I mean, we shouldn't even have $50,000 and $50,000 houses in the US anymore, right? Like it's insane. So I think that's my big question. Like, how do we do that?
That's a great answer, man. I don't have much to add besides like, I wish there was a strategy where we could be part of that solution, right? And we've spent time talking about it and thinking about it. And at this point, I don't know what it is, but I hope as we get better and better with real estate, over time, we can look like we're in Lawton, Oklahoma. We got a bunch of rentals in Lawton, Oklahoma. Some of them are nice areas. Some of them are not nice areas. I wish we could take some of these in the not nice areas, buy more of them, and figure out a way to start helping some of those neighborhoods progress, right? Like, I don't know exactly what that strategy would be, but I wish we could do it. But your answer was awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you can try to be a non-predatory lease option person, hey, live in my house, give me $2,000 at closing, pay me rent, and then in 2 to 3 years, buy the house at this preset price, right? The problem is like, if there's no appreciation in the area and you're trying to make a good buck, it's like, is the house even worth what you're trying to sell it to them in 2 years because of the maintenance you're probably not doing? It's hard not to be predatory, which makes me feel like, I don't want to be too close to it. You know what I mean? So, and the chances of them securing a loan if they bought a $50,000 house is also somewhat low. So it's kind of messed up.
All right, let's maybe we got time for 3 more topics. What else you got?
Okay, let me look. That's actually all I had, dude. Those are all the topics I had.
Here's one I've got for you. So we've got a newsletter, vrei.co, if you want to sign up for the newsletter, okay? But we have a section that talks about news stories, right? And I think some of our peers, and definitely our parents, watch the nightly news every night. Right. So if your parents are anything like my parents, they watch the news and then they give you a few pieces of advice about what they saw in the news, and say President Biden's moratorium on evictions, or, what one of the newscasters said about interest rates and how that's going to affect prices. What are you consuming for news? Do you think any of that helps us predict where the market is going? What is your thought there?
I definitely try to read a good amount. I do follow The Hustle, which I find to be a good macroeconomic source or curator of information. So I do read a lot of those articles. I do read Business Insider a lot because they have good random articles on real estate. And from a podcast perspective, I do My First Million. I can't leave this out. I follow Mike Del Prete a lot. He is the iBuyer. He's probably the most well-known iBuyer subject matter expert, I guess you can call him. And his articles are super awesome. They're bite-sized. They're only 500 words, maybe less. And he gives out a lot of good information. So in terms of seeing what's happening at a macro picture at the single family level, it's really, really helpful. So we got that. And then also I'm starting to read Radius's website for self-storage stuff. They have a lot of good news clippings and good macroeconomic data if you're into that asset class.
Yeah, I like it. I think I agree with everything you said, but I'm on I think pretty low volume news diet where I really try not to consume that much. I don't watch the news. I don't look at any newspapers. I might read news articles one day a week, right? Where one day a week, I'm going to try to find all the top articles on real estate. And I'm probably going to do that through Twitter or just going to Google News and, seeing what's trending. Okay. So you said podcasts. What's one podcast recommendation you have? And then one book recommendation you have?
The Virtual Real Estate Investing Podcast. No, I'm just playing. I'll reiterate, which is ours. I'll reiterate. I think My First Million is really, really good. I think if you're starting out in wholesaling or single family real estate, I think Real Estate Disruptors is great when you're starting out. I think after you're in it for a year or two, you start to hear the same stuff over and over. But if you're just beginning, it's excellent. And then one book, I think if you're in the entrepreneurial train, I'm a huge Malcolm Gladwell fan. I've been reading his books all month. And I think David and Goliath is my favorite one because it kind of talks about, I think it really speaks to the small business owner and kind of how you have to run your business in order to compete with people that are maybe bigger than you and getting it off the ground. So if you're in the need for a book, that's an awesome book.
Nice. I like it. So my podcast recommendation, I had to look on my phone, but I follow him on Twitter. He's really good, but it's called The Fort, F-O-R-T, The Fort with Chris Powers. He's a real estate investor, private equity guy out of Fort Worth, Texas, but has some good guests. I think he's a smart guy. I'm learning from him. Puts out some good stuff on Twitter as well. For book, I'm reading Poor Charlie's Almanac, which is the Charlie Munger book, which I think Charlie Munger is a genius straight up. And his ability to communicate kind of complex things is amazing. The book is tough, right? Like it's a lot of people's favorite book, but it is a dry read. So I'm struggling through it, and I often have to read 3 or 4 pages and then kind of think about it. But I really like it. The last thing we should talk about quick is our 30 for 30 shipped. I don't think we've really talked about that, so we should push people that way a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So John and I signed up for Ship 30, which is essentially it's kind of like a mastermind or cohort, I guess they're calling it, of about 400 people that started out at the end of June. And we're supposed to write every single day on Twitter, about 250 to 500 words. And we're on day 5, I think we're on. So we've written 5 days in a row. I've actually been doing it since last week. So I'm on like day 8. I started early. We're really writing about single family, entrepreneurship, self-improvement. I guess that's kind of the 3 pillars we're kind of operating in. And I actually think our stuff is really good. Like I look at our articles, I'm like, yeah, I think we're adding a lot of value. So if you want to read, give it a look, give us feedback. We're anxious to see if we're adding value or not.
Yeah, writing something and publishing every day is interesting though, right? Like it's another grind, something that maybe we should not have put on our plates when we've got everything else going on, but we did, right? So let's take us out. If you want to get on our new newsletter, vrei.co, go there, sign up for newsletter. We'd really appreciate it. Please leave us a review. We went from 18 to 20 reviews. So whoever gave us a review out there, we appreciate it. If you haven't, hook us up, give us some reviews. If you've got a deal, we want to be your cash buyer. Hit us up so we can buy your deals. If you want to buy any of our deals, go to graylineinvestments.com to get on our cash buyer list. Frank, as always, you shouldn't be surprised. Take us out, brother.
I just want to thank everybody for listening. This was a really fun episode. If you have any suggestions on future content, hit us up. I'm at frank@graylineinvestments.com or Twitter. I'm at frankscap with 2 P's. Thank you.